尋常に勝負。
お前はもう死んでいる。
何？
Well, that was interesting. So, welcome back to the channel, lads and ladies, and welcome back into the skies of the helicopter event. This is an arcade enduring confrontation style event with a few special rules, and we already talked about those in our last video. This is just going to be a further exploration of the possibilities and the meta. There's definitely more that could use conversation with this game mode, and getting a multitude of perspectives is definitely helpful when it comes to that, so I look forward to hearing from you guys. One of the things that's exciting about getting in on these experimental game modes is that you do get to talk a lot about how things are working out for people and what they're looking for in a mode like this, and it often comes in the form of complaints, which is something that I try to avoid until I really have a good feel for what it is that, well, I suppose there's still some things I can complain about, like getting one shot from 1.5 clicks away on the move by an AA truck that was apparently firing through the back of the relief driver's head. Typical Soviet strategy. Seems to have worked out well for him. Thankfully, that does not happen often, and I honestly think that it's something of a bug. I've had that happen to me before in aircraft, where just randomly the enemy AA will have perfect aim and one-shot your pilot with no chance for you at all. Thankfully, those things are rare, and we found a good spot on the map, so it's time to get into sharing my secrets with you. Now, one of the main complaints that people have is that the PvP is not all that fun, exciting, or diverse, and I can definitely relate to that. I far prefer to go after ground targets because it really helps me learn my aircraft, and it's in a lower stress environment. And because I'm not constantly dying and respawning, I don't have that roughly 4 to 5 minute commute time between my airfield and the battlefield. So it's definitely helpful to avoid conflict with enemies. And the best way for me to do that is to avoid the events in the battle. We're talking the ground battles, the air domination zones, and instead to fly either high if there's no one covering the heights, or low if no one's looking low, to get to one of the major towns or villages on the map. And if you look at the tactical map, you can see the names of towns. If they're on the enemy side of the lines, there's often a place where tanks and AA or artillery positions spawn, and these are things that you can farm for ground kills, and also to experience, well, a quieter corner of the battlefield. In this match, one of the people I was chatting with mentioned that they would really like to find a nice hiding spot to just play the game away from all the people that were interested in PvP. And this is by no means a safe zone, as you will shortly see, but the enemy definitely doesn't expect you to be here all that often, especially since these enemy vehicles are not registered on their map. You have to discover these vehicles, and so it really does help to scout around behind enemy lines, again making your targets the population centers within the enemy map, and then to check those areas for ground targets that you can take down. And the UH-1 BXM30, I think I got it right this time, with the experimental 30mm gun pods is a very effective, I said very effective, very effective ground strike platform for taking down both soft and hard ground targets. However, because of the way that hits are registered in Enduring Confrontation, and because of the way that ground target armor is modeled, which is not the same as in realistic battles, I'm talking, of course, realistic tank battles, when you're playing against people. They're not modeled the same as player vehicles, so there are a few wonky ways that you can cheese that, or that you can get frustrated trying to punch through armor that you should have the penetration power to go through, but the game is just like, nope. So specifically for these M4 Shermans, the way to destroy them with anything that has a decent amount of penetration is to hit the rear armor plate, which is only, I think, around 30 some millimeters thick, or to hit the lower side armor around the area of the tracks. Any place that you punch through the armor will cause damage to the enemy vehicle, with just a few hits often being enough to destroy the enemy with the 30mm cannons. Now that brings me to a little bit of talk about the Huey itself. In arcade and in realistic as well, the flight model of the Huey in particular is trash. The Cobra flies much smoother than the Huey, and you would suppose that it would be a bit more nimble and perhaps even stable of a platform, although the Huey itself was a rather stable platform. Hence why it was utilized so heavily in thickly forested areas with tiny and insane helipads, so to speak, landing areas, and it was so successful as a troop transport, infiltration, exfiltration kind of vehicle. In the game, its flight model is hopefully still a work in progress, because it's even more wonky than the Focke-Wulf, and you will see that later on. The tail specifically is modeled very oddly, and you'll see that whenever we roll, we get a counter wobble for a number of seconds that really throws us off course. With mouse aim, it's almost impossible to fly straight, and without mouse aim, it's even more wobbly. When you shift to the gunner view, the aircraft really controls strangely, and specifically with the XM30 gun pods, or I should say cannon turrets, the gunner view is a bit bugged, specifically that you cannot shift seamlessly between controlling the left and right gunner, and the gun camera is bound to the gun itself instead of being independent with the gun's tracking according to their programming, I suppose, as it is in the third person view. If that doesn't really make sense to you, don't mind, play the Huey with the 30mm gun cannons and you will experience what I'm talking about. Suffice to say, it is a work in progress vehicle still at this point. Obviously, helicopters are still being worked on an almost daily basis, and so I expect a lot of these things to be improved. And when it comes down to a gameplay level, the wobbliness, the odd controls of the Huey Hog can be compensated for. The odd characteristics of the 30mm turrets, again, can be dealt with, and it's not a crippling issue. it just takes a bit of learning, and once you accept that, this is not a final product, this is not something that's really finished, we're really in here on a testing level, even at this point, then you can get kind of excited about knowing it when it was garbage and learning how to make it work, and that will only make you more effective when this does become a more polished product. And as you see, we can still get some kills. By the way, when talking about polish, I'm not quite sure that 6 or 7 M4 Shermans in real life were capable of parking inside each other. That may have been a Serbian modification, I'm not sure, but I suspect that Enduring Confrontation does still need some work when it comes to the AI pathfinding. I have also watched several medium tanks drive into the river, of course, even more hilariously, after Gaijin specifically said that they fixed the issue in patch notes a few patches ago. So I always laugh about that. It's almost like when they say they've fixed an issue, such as the issue with server client desync of vehicle locations, and thus the odd bounces that appear to happen, ricocheting off the flat side of a Tiger 2's turret, comes to mind a few times in a row. But many examples can be found of that. It's almost as though as soon as they announce they've fixed it, it's really their way of saying, we understand there's a problem and we're working on it. Stay tuned. So, Gaijin is War Thunder is a massive game, and so it will continually be in a process of evaluation and fixing bugs, and they're just going to be there in order to preserve your sanity. Of course, it's not something that you should enjoy, but it is something you should learn to live with if you plan to continue to play this game. So buck up, Sonny Jim, keep that stiff upper lip, and just do your best to adapt to the situation. So to briefly sum up what I've shared with you in this video, specifically with regard to helicopters, they're still a bit buggy. The Huey has a very, very buggy flight model, and the gun targeting system for helicopters is really cool. It's very helpful, but it's also rather buggy, and there are ways of working around that. The best way to figure out how to work with the targeting system is really to play around with it yourself and find out what works for you. What has worked for me is to find the dead zones and where the guns start to perform badly, and then to adjust my playstyle around that. I don't really rely on the gunner view very much, and it's not even available in the AH-1G Cobra, even though you have a gunner whose sole job is to operate the minigun. You only have the standard cockpit or third-person view, no way to hover and control the chin turret via a gunner position. That is something that I would like to see changed. I'd also like to see that if your gunner gets taken down, the pilot can control the guns in some manner. He's not able to control the chin turret currently if the gunner gets taken down, leaving you only with secondary armament to defend yourself. I think it's realistic that the pilot could also control the chin turret, and as a compromise, perhaps the chin turret could move into a fixed forward position, and the gunner could use it as offensive guns that you find on an airplane. So it's okay if that does not get adjusted, but for the purposes of balance and enjoyment, I feel it's reasonable to see that worked on a bit. So, speaking of things that would be helpful to be worked on, another one of the common complaints with this game mode is that you can encounter top tier helicopters that really outperform you in an anti-aircraft role, and you are about to see the extended version of what I showed you in the intro, we're going to get targeted by an AH-1Z, and because of the, well, decent defensive flying that I employ against his guided missiles, and then the interesting way that loss of tail rotor works in the game, we're gonna manage to get that kill. But until that point, we've got a little bit of lurking around here, trying to find targets. One of the main ways, I forgot to mention, there's actually a little bit of PvP going on here, and even though I've found my happy place, it's being invaded, it's now close to the front lines. We managed to get a nice snipe on the Hind before he's really able to engage us. He was flying low and in a straight line. It would have behooved him to nose up to trade some of his forward momentum for rotor blade RPMs and altitude, which he could then use to maneuver more effectively. Helicopters do not maneuver well, regardless of their model, with perhaps a slight exception for the AH-1Z, which is a nimble boy, according to what I've seen. They do not maneuver well at high speed. So if you're cruising around at low altitude, as you see us dodging these rockets, you're actually better off at a lower airspeed. We're talking 70 miles per hour relatively, and so nose up to burn off some of your speed once you get into an encounter. This is not a boom and zoom aircraft. This is not even a turner. This is a head-on monster. So you always want to find a way to get your head facing toward the enemy, as we get a nice critical hit on the Hind. I really thought that he was going down, but it's going to be a bit. And this would be the same guy who we just killed, deciding to spawn right next to our location, and I suppose try and go for a revenge kill. But unless you're very confident in taking down an enemy in a head-on situation, here we see him firing rockets individually. It probably would have been better if he had used the there's a function to fire your rockets much more rapidly. It's called like a salvo fire or something, and I think we actually bounced a rocket there. So poor fella, he's just not having a good day. But we're not doing a whole lot better, having a difficult time getting the guns on target. These 30mm cannons, while deadly on an unsuspecting enemy, are not nearly as effective at close-range dogfights, or as I like to call them with helicopters, wrestling matches, because they don't track well. They wobble around along with the Huey itself. They can't elevate very well, and they're rather low-speed projectiles. Even so, they pack a terrible punch when they do connect, and we managed to get that double kill on some players that were interested in taking us down. Now the ground is free for us to go about our business, and with joy we go back to our true calling, which is to destroy red blips and not even worry about the PvP aspect of this game. I really feel that helicopters are the most fun when you're destroying ground-based AI, but that's just me. Other people have their own opinions about the best way to play the game. So now you see us noticing a few people in our area. One of them appears to be sniping with AGMs, so we tried to get the long range hits on him, but again, low velocity 30mm cannons, not very effective in that role. Another enemy at low altitude trying to hit us with rockets. Those are a viable strategy, but again, you really want to fire in volleys. You want to shoot a ripple of rockets at the enemy. Anything with a low rate of fire is going to have a very difficult time taking down helicopters. You really have to get lucky or really know where you're shooting. We decide to prioritize the enemy who's at high altitude sitting still. We really should have been able to kill him earlier, but we just weren't getting our guns on target. As for that enemy who was firing rockets at us, I don't see him. Did he scamper off? Maybe he got frustrated. I did actually look around for him for a while, but I couldn't spot him, so we went back to business as usual. Our goal is not to camp that enemy airfield, even though it's right next to us, and we definitely don't have the luxury of ignoring enemies who spawn in, so we do have to go after them in an aggressive manner. Was that a rocket? Was that a missile that just flew past us while we were checking the score real quick? Well, if it was, we're lucky to be alive. I have no idea where that came from, so hopefully that person won't target us again. Maybe I was just seeing things. That was definitely a rocket. Okay, what's going on here? Somebody's shooting at us at long range, and I have no idea where they are. A little bit of defensive flying, and our engine is dying anyway, so I figure let's just pick up a couple of ground kills real quick, and then we'll check our tail to see if we even have a chance of taking down somebody. Again, climb and reduce speed, and then use your roll to avoid enemy fire. That is what has been the most effective for me in defensive flying in a helicopter, and again, that's one of the areas that is just evolving now. I welcome anyone's suggestions when it comes to different ideas for how to accomplish this. I've only been able to go off of my own experience, but air-to-air encounters with helicopters are not entirely one-sided. It's not just about being the first person to aim your guns at the enemy. That's a guided missile, so as soon as the warning comes up, we dodge away, and then another one eventually comes in for us. I did a little bit of cutting there. You've already seen this scene. But look at the way that, obviously this is arcade, but the Huey is capable of some very graceful maneuvers. When you're directly controlling it, it's really, as we lose our tail. Now this shouldn't happen. This is what happens in the game right now in arcade mode when you lose your tail. That's not exactly what should happen. So again, when you look at the enemy's perspective, we've traded tails here. This is what happens in the game when you lose your tail, and this is what should happen. No babies were harmed in the making of this film. I mean, she did wail a little bit. I feel kind of guilty. She just wasn't holding on tight enough. Next time, no riding on the horsey while also eating a piece of pizza. But it's just so American. Anyway guys, hope you liked that video. I definitely had a good time getting this footage, and I look forward to playing this game mode some more. It's definitely the best way to grind, as you see from the results. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye bye.